Hello, welcome to the Kayura and Mal podcast, where we are documenting our journey of my fiance trying to turn me into a gamer. I'm Kayura.
And I'm Malganis.
For those new to our podcast, I grew up playing Xbox with my brother, being forced to play with my brother, and saying I was terrible is probably a bit of an understatement. This led to me kind of avoiding gaming for about 15 years until my fiance convinced me to try gaming with him. So we did go more in depth on my background with it in our first podcast.
But the audio really sucks.
You've been warned. Listen at your own will.
I mean, there's good content in there. It's just the audio is really bad because I am literally learning by the hour and the day how to tune audio correctly. But yeah, so just bear with us. We're getting better. We're learning as we go. So how do we feel about today? Are we feeling better?
Well, first of all, your face is hardly in the view.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get like the perfect distance from the mic. I'm trying to stay like right in the perfect decibel level right now.
Can you tilt your camera down a little bit? Would that work?
I think I can. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, that's a lot
Is
better.
that a little bit better? Okay.
Not getting just your
can
forehead.
they can see my ugly mug.
Okay, back to what our viewers came for, gaming stuff. After yesterday's session, I don't know if I feel any better. I feel like the only reason I'm off the island is because of everybody else.
There's a lot of raids I've made it to the end of because of everybody else.
Yeah,
So it happens. It happens.
I don't really feel like I'm getting any better.
I think so. The key thing I feel like that you're struggling with is, and I know, and I chose World of Warcraft specifically because, and it sucks because we are playing retail, and retail is a more dexterous and dexterous and reaction time based game than perhaps classic World of Warcraft was, or Wrath of the Lich King Classic, soon to be Cata Classic. But it is a little bit softer on the noobs. Death is not so punishing. And you get more guidance as you move throughout the world if you chose to play solo. But there is a certain amount of, regardless of whether or not this was classic or this was, retail like you're playing now, you got to press the button again. Does that make sense? If you're casting a free cast or casting a spell that has no cooldown on it, you got to hit it again. You can't just one shot things at level 9.
Yeah, and I keep pressing it and it does nothing because
so
just...
if you there's really kind of two things you need to focus on in like your peripherals, and that would be focusing on what you're targeting, so that's what you're targeting, and we'll get an add-on so we can kind of move your buttons around and move your frames around. Actually, I think it's already built into the game now with the edit mode. We'll move your frames so they're more to the center of your screen. So like your health bar and the enemy's health bar, we'll put them next to each other. So you'll know when you're targeting something and you'll know what you're targeting. And then we'll readjust your button layout because mages have a bajillion buttons. So that it's easier to comprehend and you know what buttons are important and what buttons are not important. Spells kind of break down into like your primary rotation, your cooldowns, your utility, and then just like kind of flavor spells that, even though they've kind of done away with a lot of the flavor spells as time has gone on, which sucks, but it'd be what it be.
The thing that I've noticed is, one, like the hand placement on the keyboard is it's different from what I'm used to being a programmer. I'm on a keyboard all day. Index fingers are on F and J with the little bumps there to like be like, hey, you're on F and J.
To remind you where you are, yeah.
Yeah, and with your index finger being on D and your middle finger on W, you don't have any indentation. So I find that like my hands are sometimes not where I
You
think
you
they're at.
you end up on SCF.
Yeah, that was something like I noticed yesterday. I guess I really hadn't talked to you about this, but like when I kept like trying to press one and it wasn't doing anything, I would look down and my finger would be on the squiggle
Oh,
button
you'd
beside
be on the
one.
tilde. I do that a lot, but more in like panic in like Tarkov, if I'm trying to like weapon swap real quick in like a heated firefight right before I get head-eyesed or head-throated. In arena specifically, if I'm trying to get my pistol out because I went dry on my first mag. And, just like Captain Price said, swapping to your sidearm is faster than reloading. So typically, what I do to know where I am on the keyboard at any given moment, and I never learned to type without looking at a keyboard. They tried, couldn't do it. I can like halfway do it.
Well, you didn't have the keyboard covers and get graded on the words.
Well, so we didn't have keyboard covers. They just told us to put our shirts over our eyes, and I had a sweater that I wore. That was like, it wasn't like what's the right word? Where it's when it's, what did you used to do when it was knitted? The knit wasn't super tight, so I could see through it. So I just did that, and then I moved on with my life.
Yeah, no, we had these like box covers that they would put over the keyboard, and like the only way to do it would be if you lean back and was like, and made it super obvious in a giant room that you were cheating.
Absolutely not. So I always start with my left pinky on shift. That tells me where A is, and then W and D are right there.
I'll see.
So my pinky stays attached to shift because that tells me where everything else is. But also, now that I'm primarily a healer in World of Warcraft, I don't really DPS or tank anymore unless I'm just trying to level a character for funsies. When I use Voodoo, so my mouse, my left click, middle click, and right click are 3 healing spells that are like my most used, and then shift is the tier 2 that's 3 more spells, and then control I can press with the meat right below my pinky finger. That's tier 3, and then alt is the tier 4 of spells. So I can access essentially 12 spells with barely moving my hand at all and still being able to move around. But that's a little bit more of an advanced thing.
No, I'm still I'll stick with just trying to learn where A, W, and D and 1 and 2 are right now.
WASD. Should have played a Ret Paladin. That's an old Burning Crusade joke. Why do you have 1, 2, 3, 4 WASD tattooed on your forehead? Because they would just sit there and just go and kill everything. So yeah.
I'm kind of going back to getting off the island a little bit. Yeah, no, I feel like I barely helped at all. I feel like all the other characters did all the work, and unfortunately, we kind of lost my video of it from my viewpoint.
Oh yeah, your computer crashed because I think your graphics card is dying, and I am sad.
Not really looking forward to shelling out for that replacement.
Well, hopefully we can get monetized.
Yeah, with that, don't forget to like and subscribe to help us get monetized.
Oh yeah, please like and subscribe so we can buy Kayura a new graphics card. It's not almost 10 years old. I don't know what you're talking about.
No. We'll definitely get it replaced. I know we're enjoying doing the podcast, so with that, we have to keep gaming. So
yeah, the podcast is the most fun part. The gaming part is not the most fun part.
I'm enjoying doing the podcast. I enjoy spending the time with you. It's been kind of cool. We got a little bit of engagement on our shorts. So that was exciting, getting some interaction and getting to interact with other people.
I don't know how shorts work.
We're getting there. We're slowly learning. This is only our 2nd episode of the podcast. We only have 5 shorts up and 3 gaming videos. So.
Yeah, and we're trying to add the facial video as well. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm slowly learning how to use Lightworks right now, and we're just using OBS to record. So, other than that,
we'll get there. If you know anything about podcasting or being on YouTube, we'll take any advice you got. Drop it in the comments.
Yeah, drop it in the comments, please. If we suck, tell us we suck. If we suck, please tell us how to fix it.
Yeah.
Or please send me a YouTube guide.
But, okay, back to the stuff you came for, the gaming stuff. I'm still suck. Everyone else did all the work. I wish we had the video from my perspective showing how little I was actually doing. You could probably tell from the audio of the video we did post from Mal's perspective that I was not doing a lot, and him being like, do this, do that.
So here's the big thing, and this is, I personally feel, is a symptom of where World of Warcraft has been heading, with how much they've squished. I think we're on our second or third level squish. Otherwise, we'd all be like level 200 and something by now. I think at peak we were 120 before the first level squish, and it has. I feel like for all of their efforts in scaling, it has trivialized a lot of really good content in the game, or it has created incredible difficulty spikes. And a prime example of that, you do your first dungeon, which is probably New Scarlet Monastery. I think they rolled all of vanilla dungeons into the level 10 to 15 bracket or something like that. They didn't really pace them out very well. Really, the only thing you need is a healer. You don't need anything else. You don't need a tank. You just need 4 DPS and a healer. You'll get through the dungeon just fine. Which is kind of antithetical to the holy trinity, that is the tank, DPS, healer, triumvirate. But as you get later into the game, you'll notice, it gets difficult, and then you will need certain types of tanks. You will need certain types of healers. You will need certain types of DPS. You'll need ranged DPS. You also need melee DPS. Certain bosses are weak to magical damage. Others are weak to physical damage. Certain tanks have the correct cooldowns to tank certain damage, and others don't. So I don't want you to feel like you're doing nothing now, because right now a lot of the stuff that was important has been kind of trivialized. But also, I mean, it's the same problem that World of Warcraft has had since day one, and that's no problem in World of Warcraft cannot be solved with more damage. And that's just a straight fact. The more damage you do, the less problems you're going to have, because you don't even give the boss time to really pump mechanics or anything like that. You just, boom, they're dead.
Yeah, part of me wishes I was still on the island, and the thing that I noticed is, like, it was nice having you on the island there and kind of guiding me through some of the steps and what to do in certain situations. But also, I felt like I didn't have time to play around with and be like, oh, what does this spell do? Or when is a good time to use this versus that? And so, like, I feel like, I have like what 1 through 0 all filled up with spells, but I only know what 1, 2, and 3 do.
So, kind of, the main reason I wanted you to finish the island, one, was really so I could actually help you, because in the island you're in an instance, you're in a bubble, basically, and it makes it very hard for me to help you outside of like, go there, kill that. Well, that's not very good instructions, but I also don't want to like play the character for you, but it's also difficult to help you because you always want to figure things out on your own.
I mean,
But
I learn best by doing it by myself. I don't.
well, and I kind of realized that, and what I kind of wanted is, I wanted you to get to the Elwyn Forest, is where I wanted you to get, which is the true starting area. The island is a very recent addition at their attempt to try and teach. I don't think it does a very good job teaching, because in my opinion, for Alliance players, the best teaching area is the Elwyn Forest, Westfall, Red Ridge Mountains, and Duskwood. Those 4 zones are incredible at teaching, and they teach in the most brutal of way. For those of you who remember the old Red Ridge Mountains, you could do 2 quests, and then you would run into elites and die, and you'd have to go somewhere else and come back. Red Ridge Mountains was almost like the Dark Souls zone. It's like, all right, you're whooping ass over here, and then you go over there and you're getting stomped. And they're only 100 meters apart from each other.
But I guess like the way I see it is, I do like the island aspect because it was a place for me to kind of learn and have a chance to die without it just being like frustrating of I'm in the game with other people and now like
Well,
what I do impacts them.
so part of part of the part of the I don't know how to say this and not sound mean. There are other people on that island, and as you noticed as we got towards the end, you remember we had to fight that big bird.
And I get that, but the beginning was very like independent more so.
Right, right. So, well, and even in the overworld where you are now, you'll find that there are emptier zones, and Draenor is a lower population server, so you'll find yourself alone very often.
I guess for me it's like I like the area of getting the chance to learn without just being thrown in with everything else.
Right,
And
and you'll get that chance again. That's what I'm telling you. You know, I'm
like and I get that, but at the same time like the island it makes it feel like it's more low stakes.
okay. Okay, all right.
And maybe it's just because I don't know enough about
You
World of
you don't you
Warcraft.
don't know enough about it. That's why.
Okay.
In my opinion, the island is more high stakes because if you don't complete, you don't leave. In Elwyn Forest, if you don't complete, you're like, all right, screw it, I'll go somewhere else. Does that make sense?
But like with the island, like things regenerate, they come back. Like
Things regenerate and come back in the overworld.
as like what I'm saying is the island for me is just like that's meant to be a training ground.
Right.
So I don't know how to explain it, but I liked it as someone coming in who grew up with not having a training ground and then getting killed off in the first 5 seconds of every video game I've ever played, or even Mario Kart driving off the track on the very first turn and being like, well, what's the point of trying to learn how to play if I'm not even going to be able to stay in long enough to learn how to play? It was a introductory place for me to feel comfortable without getting killed in the first 5 seconds and giving up.
And I promise you that won't happen.
But if I'm looking at it from a perspective of like, I don't know that.
Right.
Like, I know nothing about WoW. And for having such bad experience, I'm not going to go do the research on it
Okay.
to start. So for me, it was a way that made me feel comfortable. And I feel like makes other people who are maybe trying to get into it have a place to feel more comfortable to start without just being thrown in and thinking, well, what's the point if I'm just going to get killed off so quickly?
So I promise you, you're not going to get killed off. I promise you.
Like, and I get that, but there was so much I didn't know. Like when I died, I was just like, well, now I have to start all over again, and I didn't. But
Well-
people coming into it, we don't know these things.
Right, right, and that's understandable. Well, and that's you mentioned that it reminds me of a story from Preach Gaming. He came from an MMO called Neocron, that is really really old for those of you who remember that game. I'm actually a little too young for that game, and I'm almost 30. And if you died in Neocron, you lost experience. Like it was punishing if you died in Neocron. And then World of Warcraft came out, and there was no punishment for death other than your armor degraded a little bit. That was it. That was the only punishment for death. And you either had to res at a graveyard and wait for res sickness to go away, or you just walk back to your body and spawn in normal, sit down, eat and drink, and replenish your health and mana. Or if you're a warrior, just eat an entire, Chinese buffet.
And that's something of like, learning now of like, okay, so like there is these things like, if I die, it's not the end of the world. I can keep going in the game. But it just, like I said, coming as a gamer, like if I just dropped me into the city and I started doing like lack of a better word, like real quests that are not just this like training ground to learn how to play the game.
Well, and you were doing real quests on the island, like I'm
like, and I get that, but it made it seem less high stakes as someone, and I get like it is the equivalent of being in the game, but I guess for me it's like tricking the mind of like, hey, we're helping you to learn how to play this. If you suck at it here, take your time learning how to do these things.
And it's weird that you say it was less stakes on the island, because there's been a massive shift in the trend of quests over time, and I think people that have played long enough will probably know what I'm talking about. And that's, in vanilla World of Warcraft, you were just another dude. You were just some dude like, hey, you over there, go kill me some wolves. I don't know who you are. Kill them. Prove yourself to me. And now quests are, oh, great savior of Azeroth, the world will end if you do not bake me 4 loaves of bread. You know, it's like the stakes on the quest are much higher, and or the perceived stakes, even though really there's no stakes. And you know, the island being a recent addition is it makes me feel like it has the modern stakes of the quest, you know, implemented. It's like if we don't stop this ogre shaman or warlock, whatever he was, you know, Gorgrok, you know, he's going to invade Stormwind and kill everybody, you know. But I remember starting out in Teldrassil as a night elf druid, you know, during the Wrath of the Lich King when I got my first World of Warcraft account. It was like, hey, go kill some boars. Thanks, man.
Well, I mean, the sense of urgency, it kind of reminds me of like marketing for like fashion industry, or even like look at Target and the Stanley Cups. It's
Don't get me started on the Stanley Cups. Nalgene supremacy.
But if you look at it, the sense of urgency is kind of what drives people, particularly like in marketing. And I feel like World of Warcraft is kind of doing something similar by creating the sense of urgency. It keeps them in the game, it keeps them playing, it keeps them on task. Just kind of like with marketing, it keeps them coming back. They think there's this sense of urgency. Oh, I have to do this now. I have to get this now.
And it's interesting you say that. I guess it's because I'm such an old WoW FUD. But I feel no sense of urgency now, but that's also because I've been through so many tiers of raiding. You know, having been an arena healer, I've done everything in a raid except for tank. Well, actually, I have tanked before because I had to off tank it during Dragon Soul on my Death Knight. So I've done everything. So I feel no sense of urgency really to do anything in the story anymore, especially since you know, I'd say realistically, since we killed Garrosh at the end of Siege of Orgrimmar, I feel no urgency because every threat that's been presented, other than, you know, during Legion, Tomb of Sargeras, Return of Illidan, has just kind of felt empty to a degree, if that makes sense. They're like, you know, hey, if we don't face this threat, the world's gonna end. I'm like, oh great, it's just another fucking Tuesday in Azeroth, you know what I mean? But I guess from a new player's perspective, everything feels important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because they don't really know how the game works or what's going on with it. And even I'm thinking from like a video game designer perspective of if you want your game to last, you know, let's say 50 years from now, is eventually the people who started playing when the game first came out, they're eventually going to stop playing for one reason or another, whether it be that, you know, they get busy with kids and a spouse, or they end up in a nursing home and don't have access to a computer. Like, they're eventually going to get older, things are going to happen in life, they're going to stop playing. The way that they have to keep thriving is getting more people into the game with the newer generations. And especially if you look at kind of the particularly like Gen Alpha and even like Gen Z, even though they're turning into adults now, like what piques them, and it's very much like they don't have a huge attention span with TikTok coming through and the YouTube shorts. Of they need very quick something grabbing their attention, and I feel like WoW is kind of trying to do the same thing, a very quick intro, hey, this is very important, sense of urgency to kind of draw in the new generation.
So to quote the great Asmongold, actually more to paraphrase because I can't quote him exactly, Wrath of the Lich King was the beginning of some would say the end. Vanilla and Burning Crusade was a very different game. And I experienced that through private servers and through, you know, classic World of Warcraft. I'm still working on a vanilla classic Warlock. I've been playing Season of Discovery. I'm working on a couple different characters in Wrath Classic right now. But Wrath of the Lich King is when they changed the game to try and bring in new players to appeal to a broader audience, because things were very different before then. For good and for bad. I would say the sense of community drove a lot of that. But also I'm losing where I'm at. Because I got a million thoughts on this. Here's a prime example. We'll do a front and back comparison. So in vanilla World of Warcraft, once you hit level 60, you still had another game. You had to go get your dungeon blues, and then you had to go get your prebis for Molten Core, and then you had to go to Molten Core. Then I think it was Molten Core, Blackwing Layer, Onyxia, or was it Onyxia, Molten Core, Blackwing Layer, to fill out your T1. And then once you did that, you did AQ20, AQ40. Once you completed AQ, then you could go on, and then you could do Naxxramas eventually. I think only 2% of players actually completed Naxxramas. It was that difficult, but the path to get there was so long. It wasn't just hit level 60, go to the newest raid like it is now. Now if you buy a character boost or you buy the new expansion, you get a character boost and they immediately give you raid ready gear. Like, you are ready for raid. You can immediately queue for LFR looking for raid, experience the newest content. Don't look at the old content. Don't look at that. Look at our newest raid. There's no progression system. And that's kind of how it used to be. I think it was like that in vanilla, Burning Crusade, and really Wrath, and you could probably argue in Kata as well. Depending on what raid you were talking about, because Dragon Soul, once LFR for Dragon Soul came out, you didn't need Firelands, you didn't need Bastion of Twilight, you didn't need Throne of the Four Winds, because you were already getting tier sets or tier bonus sets from the LFR that eclipse that in terms of power scaling and item level and overall stats. But yeah, I definitely see where you feel like you're just going to die and you're going to have to start all over again, but I promise you that's not the case.
And I know that now. But it's one of those things of, like I said, I'm coming from, you got to think a little bit from the perspective of people coming in having never played. They don't know this stuff unless they've been a gamer before and have, come in and have done some research. But if you're coming from someone fresh off the streets, hasn't played in years, hates video games, they're coming in with the assumption of like even if you look at Mario Kart, if you drove off the track, okay, you didn't die, it placed you back on the track, but it took so long that you got so far behind that I was like, well, what's the point of really trying that hard to continue this race? Because I'm not going to stand a chance of winning. And WoW definitely takes that out, but by having kind of this, what is perceived as a lower stakes start to the game, I feel like gives people who have such bad experience coming in with video games beforehand, it's like I get a place where I can kind of practice and learn. And like I said, it's just tricking the mind. It may not be any different, but it tricks the mind into keeping them there.
Oh yeah, and don't get me wrong, I enjoy both. I enjoy fighting against a world-ending threat just as much as I enjoy doing side quest. I'm trying to think what's a good example. Like Dungeons and Dragons side quest, right? So your DM has an overall campaign. He wants things to start here, move through here, end here. But he's going to sprinkle side quests in, at least if he's a good dungeon master. And sometimes the side quests are better and more important and integral to the story than the main quest. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think there are points in World of Warcraft where the side quest, or at least there used to be, was almost more important than the main quest to certain players. I am very fond of Darkwood, or was it the Darkwood? Yeah. And Ashenvale. I love those two zones. I remember, pre-Kata and post-Kata, I still loved them. They were a lot of fun to play in because that was my old stomping ground, to include Teldrassil. And then that Banshee Queen burned my fucking tree down. But I love the Night Elf starting area. That's where I cut my teeth and learned what a quest was, how to move around, how to strategize and do things when you didn't know what you were doing. I remember being effectively a balance druid, which as a caster, wearing agility gear because I thought it looked cool. But that's old school World of Warcraft. Nobody knew what they were doing and everybody was bad at the game.
But now you have it that there are people who are good at the game and know what they're doing, and them also trying to, think you're, from a marketing standpoint, always trying to get new people in. And so there's people coming in having no idea what they're doing and having to deal with the backlash from the people who know what they're doing and are really good at the game.
What was it from that video? It's rude to suck at World of Warcraft. There was something in a raid, and I can't remember what raid it was, where it was completely arbitrary whether or not you went left or right because you were just walking somewhere. It was just set dressing for the raid. And I think it was, you had to go left. If you went right, you were scum of the earth. If you went left, you were a normal human being. And that was like the perception that had been established in the community, that was exemplified heavily during LFR raids. And I was like, this is dumb. This is so dumb.
Yeah, no, it really is. And you have to think about, there are people who really would probably enjoy getting into the gaming and want to, but other streamers and YouTubers have created this fear of doing it. And of course, not everyone, I'm speaking very generally. But like, it's something of when it's out there of streamers, getting upset because someone doesn't know what they're doing. And, it could be that the person who doesn't know what they're doing has been gaming for 10 plus years. It could be that this is their first day.
I never know what I'm doing. I'm making it up as I go along. Every raid, I just make it up as I go along.
But, it's like when there's people who, for me, like, I barely know what I'm doing. And even like with one of our shorts that did really well, one of our comments was like, there's no way this is real. It's like,
oh, it absolutely was real.
It was 100% real. But people have this mindset of there's no way, like, and it creates this negative stigmatism of like, well, why, if people don't want me there in this environment, why should I be there?
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. Two things though. The first one being the staged content that happens a lot in the world today, is hysterical, but I promise you. Yeah, walk up and go to the left, turns right.
I'm really that bad.
It's not bad it's not a bad at the game thing. It's
I've never, this is my first time playing video games on a computer.
Right, exactly.
Even like with the video games I played in the past, they were all like Xbox or Nintendo. It was never computer games. Mouse and keyboard, which I barely even learned how to navigate and move around a screen with an Xbox controller. So yeah.
Well, and I think if I plugged you into Mr. Robot and you were reviewing logs and parses and things like that, and you started digging into the analytics of it on like higher end rating, I think you would really enjoy it. The problem is you don't have the muscle memory to go with it, or the skill set that comes with that development.
Oh yeah, no. And that's something I've noticed is you do slowly develop muscle memory of, and again, sadly people couldn't see my footage with the last one, but it was this constant like hitting 1 and 2, and I kind of learned that like the number of times I could hit 1 before I could hit 2 again.
Right. So,
but it also meant that all my other numbers, because I haven't been using them, I kind of forget they're there because I don't have any muscle memory development for that.
Well, and that's a development of a rotation, is that's how rotations develop. I know I can cast Frostbolt 3 times before this other spell comes off cooldown, and I can cast it again for free within the latency window of a Frostbolt cast. So learning those things is imperative. But like I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, or at least I used to be, where you know the computer says I can do this much. Okay, well I gotta like vibe check it. I gotta go do it for real. I gotta see how it feels to actually do it.
And that's something to have even just like last night, I was kind of like laying in bed and I was thinking about some of the things we were working on. I was just like, oh, that situation, I should have done this when we had these two enemies. I could have done something like this and we could have tackled one and we would have came out a lot better in the end. But just like in the moment of trying to fight, it's like I couldn't even begin to tell you what button. Even laying down last night, I don't know what buttons those spells are.
Oh
So
yeah, I've definitely hit a point. I don't know if this is with age or lack of practice or something like that. I wax waywardly about my time raiding, where and not that I was an amazing raider top tier. I absolutely wasn't. I feel like I was in a high percentage of the player base, but um, I was able to do things without thinking. It was see problem, automatically have solution to said problem or reaction to problem. Now I'm like, wait a second. I have a cooldown for this. Where is that cooldown? I have to like think about it.
mhm.
But I think a lot of that is just I've been focusing so much on career and and fitness and other things that reminds me I've got to take my creatine for the day, and you know what I mean. Like it's just different now. It feels very different for me. But it is nice seeing somebody else, slowly developing their skill set. But you know,
Yeah, and I guess like let me ask you this question: is when you were originally started playing, I know you played a lot more starting out and even like into like probably the middle of your like gaming um adventures, but how did you kind of learn what numbers to use during what situations, or did it just become muscle memory with experience and there was a time where you were just really slow in battles trying to figure out which button to hit?
oh, I was horribly slow in battles. I was terrible at the game. So realistically, um, so and I kind of cheat too. So because I'm really bad, so I can realistically use 5 to 6, 1 through 5, 1 through 6 consistently, like efficiently, and then I can use control to get another 4 buttons, 5 buttons out of it, so I can have 8 buttons that I can consistently manage that are just tiered with each other. Um, but outside of that, like I'll see streamers, they'll have like, you know, H7 hotkeyed together as like a dual press key. Like I have control in one hotkeyed, and I'm like, how do you get your hand across the keyboard to there to make that fit together to do a thing and remember to do that and then be able to get your hand back to the set point? It's not how I like to play the game. I play the game in a very layered and consistent manner. When people just have hotkeys all over their keyboard, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm good, homie. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. No, that actually makes sense. And I mean, I get like muscle memory. I'm thinking back to like ninth grade band right now, and we had this song called. Honestly, no, it's really sad. I still remember the name of the song from ninth grade. It was called American Heritage March, and it was like I think like grade two for most like everyone else, and but for the flutes, it was like a grade four, and it like there came a point that our band teacher had to take all the flutes out of class and have another band teacher in a separate room with us teaching us how to play the song because it went so fast.
Right.
And we literally had to slow it down, something that the teacher couldn't do with the rest of the class. We had to slow it down, and slowly we sped it up until like I
Yeah,
could
you just have a tempo drop.
yeah. Well, it's like when the concert came around, I could play the song by heart without even looking at the music.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just became muscle memory because it was something we had to practice and do so much. And it was so funny too because the rest of the band hated this song. They're like, it is so boring to play. It is so easy. Why are we doing this? And then the flutes, we would all shoot daggers at them.
Just struggling along.
Yeah, and then I remember one day I showed the tuba player my music, and he just kind of like noped out of there.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is kind of similar to that of, eventually you start recognizing situations and developing muscle memory, but it does take time and you have to have the time and the patience to go along with it.
Right. And it's kind of frustrating. I was thinking about it last night. I'm leveling my second monk. I'm working on my horde server right now. And you level too fast. You level way too fast. And don't get me wrong, it's great for old people like me that have played forever and, we're further right on the skill curve than probably, well, no, I'd say the majority of the player base is probably further right on the skill curve than a newer player. But it trivializes, trivializes is the wrong word. It doesn't give you the chance to learn your class.
I can see that.
Is like, you're level 10. I remember starting out, it took me a week to get to level 10, if not 2 weeks. And granted, I wasn't playing consistently and I didn't know what I was doing. On my druid to get to level 10. But by that point, by God, I knew how to use Wrath. I knew what my core abilities were, and then level 20, and then level 30, and then level 40. I think level cap at the time was 80. I was in Wrath of the Lich King. So I think, especially I think for a mage is definitely going to be a hard climb for you because you do just get shotgunned with spells so fast. They give you so many spells, so many utilitarian spells, so many
it's a lot to take in and try to remember, and combining that with how to move around the game. Part of the reason I only feel like I'm doing as good as I am, which still isn't great, let's be honest, but the only reason I'm doing as well as I am with moving around the map is because you gave me a character that could go to Stormwind City. So we haven't really showed this, but there's been a few nights where I've come in and just walked around Stormwind City with this other character, not doing any quest or anything, but just practicing moving around the map because I have obviously I've struggled with it.
Well, this is your first time playing a video game on mouse and keyboard, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, and I remember making that transition because I was a controller. Well, actually, I was a joystick boy, playing, what was it, Galaga, in the bar in the town that I grew up, and then I moved to controller and then eventually moved to mouse and keyboard. But granted, I'd built the basic fundamentals of how to move in a video game with joysticks, but doing it with mouse and keyboard is very different. And, one of my big complaints about mouse and keyboard, I'll use a really good example. I feel like, Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, I bought it on Steam because I love Metal Gear Solid and I had a fancy computer and I wanted to play it on the highest end graphics. I had to get a controller to play it. Because mouse and keyboard, it's a 1 or a 0. It's either on or it's off. You can't feather your movement with a mouse and keyboard. You're either moving or you're not. The same with Elden Ring, because I learned to play Dark Souls on a PS3. I couldn't do it with mouse and keyboard. I had to do it with a controller. I just didn't have that feather control that's needed. But with a mouse and keyboard thing, it is a very different way of moving, because there is no half input. You're either moving on a 90, You're either moving, on an X and Y, or you're moving at a 45 degree. The only way you're able to curve and feather is by controlling with your mouse. That's the only way you can do it. And that's kind of a difficult thing for someone who's never done it before.
Yeah, no, and that's where it gets frustrating because, like, for me, it's like I look at it and the movement makes sense, and it makes sense why it's set up that way. But again, it takes muscle memory and experience of getting used to it. And yeah, it's been frustrating. And really, like I said, the only reason I'm doing so well is that I've had that extra character that I could just kind of run around Storm One City with, trying to do things and practicing walking up to characters. I do feel like that was something that drastically improved in yesterday's gaming session.
I feel like your Worgen has a depth perception issue. Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I think would alleviate a lot of your issues, and I almost want to like take your keyboard away and make you just move around with your mouse.
So I think part of that would help because sometimes, and I know this is going to sound crazy because one hand is like, left hand is with W and my right hand is with the mouse, but I'll like go to walk up and I know this is going to sound weird, but I'll think I'll have hit W, but I actually used the mouse instead to walk forward. So then I'm just like, because especially if I just need to go a short distance, I'm like, just hold down W for a second. And so then my hand is off W, but I didn't realize I had also clicked the walk on my mouse.
Oh, the auto walk.
And so then I forget to turn it off, and that's how I end up walking past characters.
It's so funny because you don't move your character like a normal person walks. You move your character like you're driving a forklift. So if you end up overshooting something, you almost try to back up like you're backing up a car and like having to do a 3-point turn. It's hilarious. You don't just like turn your character and walk. You back up and then like turn the wheel all the way to the right, so the back of the car goes to the right, and then turn the wheel all the way to the left, and then go forward. It's funny to watch, but I wish there was more footage out there. I'm sure there's quite a good bit of it, but of at least like day one World of Warcraft players in vanilla trying to watch them move around.
Yeah, no, it is still learning, but it is better. You have to admit, I'm doing better about walking up to characters.
Yeah, I do think you're doing better. I do think you're doing a lot better. The biggest thing, and even I still struggle with this to this day, and that's, I would say, casting while moving. Casting while moving is so incredibly difficult.
Yes.
So there was the Warlock who taught me how to play Warlock. This was late Cata into Mist of Pandaria because I'd played Death Knight for so long. Well, not really that long. It felt long to me, but when you're young, time is relative. But I wanted to play a different class, and I kind of started to fall in love with the Warlock class. He could cast and move, and really, it's a misnomer because you're not casting and moving. You would move, stop, cast, move, stop, cast, move, stop, cast. But he had such a natural flow and rhythm to it that he made it seamless, and I could never do it. I'm like whenever I play a caster or a healer, I'm like a turret. You just go like stick me in the ground somewhere, and I just annihilate everything in front of me or heal everything within a 40-yard range of me.
Yeah, no. That was definitely something I noticed, especially like when we were fighting the dragon. That like trying to move and dodge things while also trying to cast. It was just like it's like I can move or I can focus on casting. I can't like doing both is not going to happen right now.
Yeah, I remember. So who was it? I was in Gateway to Annihilation, which was my first guild, but I don't think they were a raiding guild. My first raiding guild was Death Dealers, great name. But that guild collapsed after I joined the army, and I was away for training. And then when I came back, I think he was the raid leader, but not the guild master. He had formed another guild called Sellout, and on that raid team, we had a standing order that was forget your DPS, move to avoid mechanics. You can't DPS if you're dead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can't deal damage if you're dead. I would rather you not deal damage and be alive to cast to deal damage later than you try and tank a raid wipe mechanic, which obviously you can't, or just put undue stress on the healers and their mana pools, because you're trying to parse high. And I know Asmongold's ears are burning right now. He's like, we got to get the parse, man. We got to get the parse. We got to parse. But it was a different raiding philosophy on that raid team. They would rather fail a fight because they didn't have enough DPS than fail a fight because they couldn't do the basic mechanics.
So I guess here's a question that I have with World of Warcraft now. So thinking about like the dragon, and that's just kind of what's fresh in my head right now is the dragon.
The final boss of that dungeon. Yeah.
Is so. Let's say it would have killed me. Would that have helped the dragon get stronger while the rest of you were still fighting it, or would it still have been like the same?
It depends. So majority of boss fights and majority of monsters, beasts, people you interact with in World of Warcraft do not get stronger when they kill people.
Okay.
I do think there's a couple raid fights where they do get stronger, but they're in old raids that are completely trivial at this point. I mean, I think my warlock can probably one shot every boss all the way up to probably Tomb of Sargeras, or probably Legion, maybe BFA. I haven't tinkered enough in BFA. The only I think Throne of Antorus. There's one I watched a monk do it, but I wasn't able to do it on my warlock, which was kind of frustrating. There's one boss I'm not fast enough to do the mechanics. I think it's a class specific fight. If you're going to solo it, other than that, you need a buddy to come in with you because you can't be in two places at one time. It's the garden fight or whatever that one is. It's like a trash fight. But typically, no, you won't encounter many things that get stronger when they kill one of your raid members.
Well, that's good to know.
Now, it'll feel that way sometimes.
Well, and obviously you have one less person
attacking one less person contributing. Like, a really good example, I think it was Spoils of Pandaria and Siege of Orgrimmar. You had to split the group into, typically you want to run, you could do it with a 10-man, obviously. I've done it with a 10-man. This was pre-Mythic. I think this was the pre-Mythic patch because Siege of Orgrimmar was the first time they introduced Mythic rating. But we were doing it with 25-mans. With a 25-man, you could take a couple losses on that fight and still get through, and it wouldn't be too bad. But in a 10-man, if one of your DPS went down or your healer went down, you were screwed. That was it. It'd wipe the fight, start over. Like you would not have the bodies to get through the rest of the fight to be able to do the damage or to be able to pump out enough healing to keep the team up so the raid could reconnoiter on top. I think I used that word correctly.
No, okay. I mean, that definitely makes sense how, people getting killed off, obviously less people to attack, meaning whoever's left in the raid has to do more work to make up for the work that they're not doing. But, okay. But I am glad to know that at least, it doesn't help the creature get stronger to make it even more difficult on top of the fact of losing somebody.
Yeah, the big thing where creatures or bosses will get stronger is there's certain mechanics for certain fights. I can't think of a boss, but I know the mechanics. So the boss will go into a state or a phase where you can't deal damage to them, and then a bunch of things will fly out of it in a circle around them, and you have to slow and kill those things before they get back to the boss. Otherwise, they'll heal him. Fights like that. That's probably the closest thing you would see on a consistent basis to that feeling.
Okay, so sometimes the bosses have their own healers that we also have to try to
Not so much they have their own healers. It's kind of like a moving target. Like a what's a good one? I'm trying to remember exactly how the mechanic to this fight worked. First boss in Siege of Orgrimmar, the water guy. There were blobs of water. There were gray blobs and blue blobs, and you had to heal the blue blobs, which would technically deal damage to the boss, and you had to kill the gray globs, the black globs. Otherwise they would heal him. Does that make sense? As they drew back into him.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah, they're not healers, but they can heal him if they get back to him.
Okay.
So, but yeah. So, other than World of Warcraft, are you willing to try any other games, or you just want to keep grinding away in WoW?
I think for right now, let's stick with WoW and still kind of getting used to mouse and keyboard and getting used to this game. I would eventually like to try other games. I don't really know what other games, but I don't feel like I'm exactly there yet either.
Yeah, we're definitely not doing League of Legends. Don't ask. Too much salt. It is a salt mine. But yeah, no, I definitely I think a first person shooter with you could be really fun. Especially Tarkov, just because of the reactions, but I think you would just get too frustrated with it, and plus it's a really stressful game to play.
Yep. Right now Tarkov is on the bottom of my list of games.
Bottom of the list, yeah. If I got Vash to come back, you'd play with him. You'd have fun with him.
I think I'd end up dead in like 5 seconds.
No, we're not playing on Factory. We're playing on Interchange or Woods.
I don't know what any of
the Factory's like arena before arena was a thing, and then Vash and I's gameplay was always never sleeping, always creeping. We always kind of moved slow. Not because we're realism Andes, just because we're slow. That's how we like to play. So, but well, it looks like we're rapidly approaching on an hour. So, you want to start wrapping it up?
Yeah, I think so.
Alrighty then. Well, you want to do our outro?
You make it seem so more like I want to sound more organic than just introducing it.
I'm just trying to cue you up. That's all I'm trying to do, babe.
Well, I mean, my part of the outro is easy. You got the hard part, so I don't need to be queued up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. If you would like to follow along with our journey, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.